Hi, I'm here to ask for your support of this resolution. Resolved that the federal government should implement a national system of education vouchers. By an education voucher, I mean a scholarship that the government gives to parents who then apply that voucher as payment to a school of their choice for their child. Now let me turn to my contentions. Contention 1. The public school system is significantly harmful. There are a number of reasons this is true. Subcontention A. The current system leads to unequal student outcomes. In the United States, we value opportunity. School is a place where children have their primary opportunity for a good life. But as we all know, not all schools are equal, and in many cases, children in poorer communities attend schools that are unequal to those in other communities. And this leads to a disparity of student outcomes. We can measure student outcomes by looking at standardized test scores and also graduation rates. Let's look at an example. In a recent report by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, 1 out of 3 students scored below basic on the 2009 National Assessment of Education Progress reading test. Among these low-performing students, 49% of them came from low-income families. And a second example from graduation rates. According to the U.S. Department of Education, high school graduation rates for the 2010-2011 school year show a discrepancy between all students and economically disadvantaged students. So just looking at one state, Ohio, it was 80% of all students graduated from high school, but when you look at the economically disadvantaged students, only 65% of the students graduated. So big difference. The test scores in graduation demonstrate that the most vulnerable in our society are the most negatively affected by our public school system. Thus, the current system is significantly harmful because it leads to unequal student outcomes. Subcontention B. The current system leads to inadequate student outcomes. We live in a global society. Our students need to be able to compete not only with their American peers, but also with graduating students from across the world. And math and science test scores are one way we can see how our schools are doing compared to schools across the world. In an assessment by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, 15-year-olds in the U.S. placed 25th out of 30 countries in math performance and 21st out of 30 in science performance. So when we compare our test scores of our students to those across the world, we can see that our current education system is not preparing our students well to compete in a global economy. This is an inadequate and harmful outcome for our students because they will not be able to find work and be independent, and if they are not able to find a job, and that should be, finding work should be, and being independent should be a goal of our education. So with my first contention, I've shown that how public school system is significantly harmful as it leads to both unequal and inadequate student outcomes. Contention 2. The public school system is inherently harmful. There are a number of reasons for this. Subcontention A. The public school system does not give choice. In the United States, we value freedom. This is exemplified in the choices that we are allowed to make in our lives. Think about it. We choose to live, where we work, where we shop for groceries, and where we worship, but we are not allowed to choose where we go to school. Isn't it odd when school is one of the most important places for a child's early development? The reason we don't get to choose is that laws are in place in our system that determine where students attend schools, and public schools are and school districts are based on zip codes of homes. So living in a particular neighborhood automatically links someone to a particular school. So if you live in a neighborhood that has poor schools, you have no choice. You still have to attend those schools. So the public school system is inherently harmful because parents do not have a choice of schools for their children. Subcontention B. The lack of choice perpetuates the problems of inadequacy and equality that I identified under significance. Because government funds schools, money goes directly from government to the school district. School districts are automatically funded, they are guaranteed funding, and they have no incentive to perform well. If we incentivize the system, however, we would likely see improvements in our school system. By this I mean, and this would lead to more equal schools and more adequate schools. In summary, I've given you 2 subcontentions demonstrating that the structure of the public school system is inherently harmful. Because a lack of financial incentive and competition to aim high, and a lack of school choice by parents, are inherent to the school system structure, students are stuck with schools they are zoned for. They are also stuck with the problems of inadequate student outcomes and inadequate student outcomes. Unequal and inadequate that I identified earlier under significantly harmful problems of public schools. Now for my plan. To make measurable and sustained improvements in our school system, we need a new law that will provide for an education voucher system. This is how the plan will work. Number 1, parents receive from the government an education voucher. Number 2, parents have the freedom to choose which school their child will attend based on their assessment of the best school to meet their child's needs. Number 3, parents use the voucher to pay for their child's education at a private school, religious or non-religious. Number 4, private schools must meet minimum standards established by the legislature in order to be eligible to accept vouchers. And 5, if desired, the legislature may set parameters for student eligibility to target subgroups of students. How does the plan meet the need? Let me explain how this plan moves us closer to having schools that lead to equal and adequate student outcomes. Vouchers give parents choice. Choice creates a market in education. With a market, we have competition. Competition breeds improvement, so lower performing schools strive better to compete in order to be competitive with other schools. School choice gives parents the freedom to choose the school that's best for their child. Focus on their child's individual needs, and finally, those disadvantaged students who have been stuck in neighborhoods with poor schools, that is, the students who need high-quality schools the most, will have another option. They will finally have an equal opportunity to receive a quality education. Finally, here are some results that support voucher programs. From the Education Gap, Vouchers in Urban Schools of the Brookings Institute, 2006. After 3 years, African American voucher students had combined reading and math scores 9 percentile points higher than the control group. And from evidence from the Washington, D.C. location of the worst public schools in the United States and most highly funded, from the Department of Education, June 2010. The students offered vouchers graduated from high school at a rate 12 percentage points higher than students in the control group. Thank you. Okay, I went over. How much? Oh, sorry.
So there are definitely significant problems with the current education system, but a voucher system is not the answer. In fact, implementing a voucher program would cause more harm than good, and I will show you why. My opponent's first contention is that the current public school system is significantly harmful, and to this she offers 2 subcontentions. Her A subcontention is that the current system leads to unequal student outcomes. To this I have one point, that the relationship between school performance and individual performance is not as strong as she says it is. I agree that there are unequal student outcomes. This is an undeniable fact. But the link between the lack of choice system we have now and the unequal outcomes are being overestimated here. According to Alan Borsick, writing for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel in March 2009, after Milwaukee voucher schools were required to participate in standardized testing, the results did not show growth, as advocates had hoped. Rather, students participating in the voucher program were outperformed in math and reading by those who remained in Milwaukee public schools. So a correlation here may exist between school performance and an individual student's outcome, but this does not equal a causal relationship. In other words, it doesn't mean that if we put these lower performing students in a higher performing school that they'll necessarily perform significantly better. So there might be other factors at play here, such as low income. Living in a low-income household might mean that their parents have to work 2 jobs, might not be home at night to help them with homework. They might have to babysit when their parents cannot afford childcare. There's a slew of other factors that these kids might have to face. My opponent's B subcontention is that the current system leads to inadequate student outcomes. I would respond that I have an issue here with her evidence. My opponent compares the U.S. to other countries and says that our lack of choice system leads us to have poorer education. So sure, East Asian countries, such as South Korea in particular, have some of the highest performing students in the world and are a largely privatized education system. But there are other very significant factors to consider here. Simon Mundy, sole correspondent of the Financial Times from October 2013 issue, writes, "Suicide is the leading cause of death for South Koreans aged between 10 and 30, putting the spotlight on the fiercely competitive education system. He describes the rigorous system in place in South Korea, where 3/4 of children received after-school tutoring late into the night, and parental expectations are extremely demanding. So while South Korea indeed tops the charts in student performance, it also is the suicide capital of the world, with an average 39 suicides every single day. There are obviously other very important factors to be considered when we hold up other countries as the model for education. So to sum up, while there are unequal outcomes in student performance, they are not necessarily caused by the school system we have, and the inadequate outcomes we have might not be as significant a problem when we consider the greater dangers of swinging in the other direction. My opponent's second contention is that the current public school system is inherently harmful. To this, she offers two sub-contentions. Her A sub-contention is that the public school system does not give choice. To this, I have a counter-argument that the lack of choice isn't actually inherent. My opponent states that people have no choice when they attend school and that this violates our freedom of choice. While it is true that parents lack choice in their child's school in some cases, this is not always the case. Parents only lack choice when they lack funds to either send their child to private school or to relocate to a district with higher performing schools. So while this is an issue, the scope of the problem is not nearly as wide as she says it is. My opponent's B sub-contention is that the lack of choice perpetuates the problems of inadequacy and inequality. And to this, I have a counter-argument that minor tweaks are already in place to correct these problems. So there are already programs on the rise to fix the problems within the current structure, and I would give one example of things like Teach for America, which sends top college graduates to low-income schools to teach for 2 years and work tirelessly to improve student performance within those schools. There are many programs like this. They have been extremely successful over the past 20 years in increasing student performance, and these are all minor tweaks that exist within the system to address the problem, so without throwing the baby of public education out with the bathwater. So to sum up, there are other programs in place that are already working to improve the current system, and also the public school system is not inherently without choice in all cases, so the problems are not inherent and can be solved without the use of vouchers. As for my plan meet need argument, I will argue that my opponent's plan does not meet the need, and I will give two reasons for this. Reason one is that private schools, unlike public schools, can reject applicants, so they might not accept students they feel won't perform well. A 2005 study by Yale professor of economics, Joseph Altanji, shows that private schools will skim off the best students with the most involved families from struggling schools, leaving the less successful students behind, therefore creating an additional system of segregation in the country, not only decreasing a system that is inherently unequal, but perpetuating it. So the voucher system in this case will help those who are already doing well, while taking away from those who are already struggling, which will widen, not close the achievement gap and not meet the need. And reason two is that the eventual outcome of this plan does not meet the need of kids. Our forefathers believed that public education should be for everyone and it should not be privatized. With the voucher system, schools could become businesses competing for your dollar, using education as a tool for profit. Teachers become salespeople, and the Walmart business model is not the right model to replace our schools, and it just does not meet the needs of kids. As for disadvantages, the biggest disadvantage here is that by redirecting tax dollars to private rather than public schools, we are taking money away from the already poorest schools, so that those who don't make it into the voucher program will be severely hurt. Because my opponent fails to mention that the program would simply not be able to incorporate all or even most students, so many will be stuck in their original school, still having no choice. So with further budget cuts to underfunded schools, teachers might be replaced by permanent subs, leading to further instability, and schools might even have to close. So if we want to work towards the goal of higher quality public education for everyone, we need to not gut the system more than it already is. So to sum up, the problems we have are not significantly related to the fix my opponent proposes. Also, there are already programs in place that are helping, so the current system is fixing itself. Therefore, the problems are not inherent to the current system. The opposition's plan won't meet the need because private schools will resort to cream skimming of voucher kids. And then finally, the significant disadvantages of this plan outweigh any advantages and positives and could make the problem we have even more severe and widespread. Given all this, I urge you to strike down the plan.